Well, that met with too much opposition, so I've given up on that notion, but I would like to still see the two combined. That's not closing St. Williams. I'm
going to have the county manager here just talk about that for a minute.
It can be built in St. Williams, but
Well,
combine the two.
It's something that Councillor Sonnenberg has brought, so I'm going to let the county manager speak for a minute. You will have your chance. Go ahead.
I wasn't here for the earlier discussion, but if this council has addressed this issue since the last election, then you are under the rules of reconsideration. And very clearly, your procedural bylaw prohibits you from doing indirectly what you cannot do directly. And most certainly, if you're a motion that would result in the closure of one or the other, if you have dealt with that since the last election, then you're subject to reconsideration, in which case the amendment itself should not be allowed by the chair, or at this point in time cannot be proper or valid but for a motion to reconsider.
Brunton?
I think we're getting mixed up here. We're not talking about eliminating St. Williams. My whole idea here is we're looking at sites, and all I'm saying is let's look at a site that can accommodate St. Williams and Port Rowan and the EMS in one site. Possible locations that can service everything. That's what the recommendation is. And maybe it can't happen, but is there a problem with looking at that? That's not the same as just eliminating St. Williams, as Councillor Sonnenberg said. We're not talking about that.
Go ahead.
Our rules do not, I wasn't here for the earlier, and our rules do not prohibit staff from engaging in argument with elected officials. But self-evidently, 5 + 1 is 6, and to say, well, now I'm just talking about a half dozen, doesn't change the fact that you're talking about 6. This is merely a semantics labeling issue at this point in time. You have a very clear motion. Staff are acting under this council's instruction. They've brought back work product that this council instructed them to do. The addition would substantively change this council's direction, and further, although I can't prove it to you, I am informed and verily believe that you have discussed a course of action that would result in a closure in one community, and this motion, this proposed amendment, would result in dealing with the same issue again. So at a minimum, it has to be subject to the rules of reconsideration.
Go I have Brunton, then Sonnenberg.
I'm trying to look at it from a common sense approach here. We may close all 3 of them before we're done and put one new one up that houses and accommodates everybody. That's what we're talking about here. But there's no hard, fast decision made on doing any of that. All we're saying is I'm getting the impression we're going to go out and look. And if we're talking about $2.5 million here, and if we can save the taxpayers a little bit of money in a combination of all those things, doesn't it make sense? We went through an argument here, Mr. County Manager, before you came about Waterford. They wanted a site here, they wanted a site there for their EMS. Finally, common sense prevailed and we got both in one building, which made sense, and I hope it saves us some money. Isn't that what we're here for?
This council has every right to bring forward to discuss any issue it wishes. The reason for the rules on reconsideration are so that the losing faction in any argument doesn't keep relitigating the issue. I brought a motion, it was defeated. I wait a period of time, I bring the motion again. This is doing indirectly what I am told and have to believe you discussed directly. It is true you could, through a notice of motion, agree to discuss this say at the next meeting. Any one of you could bring a motion to then go forward in a manner that might result in the closing of a fire hall. But the motion as it currently stands before you has at least 2 procedural problems with it. So to answer your question, yes, you can discuss any, and staff are not here to be a roadblock, but if you have considered this matter since the last election, then as it's currently constituted, it wouldn't be properly before this body.
Counselor Sonnenberg.
I'm going to withdraw my proposal.
Okay.
This is the third or fourth time we've gone around and around with this thing. I'm convinced that people around this table are content to spend $1.5 million on a new hall, fill it full of $2 million worth of chrome-covered fire trucks, and have them answer 3 calls a year. I give up. Thank you.
Counselor Black.
Before Councillor Sonnenberg gives up, I mean, he raises some really good points. There's no doubt about it. Could we not at least look at the motion that addressed this issue? Do we have that with us?
Motion is
or-
there. The motion, you have moved that motion, which is in order according to the...
No, the motion, there's the original motion that we debated that we would have to reconsider, because my recollection of that original motion was that we were looking at alternative locations for St. Williams, and the St. Williams station could actually end up being closed. So does the clerk actually have it there?
We're looking at it right now,
Okay.
trying to find it.
So I wouldn't mind seeing what it said, and I wouldn't mind seeing the date on it, because county manager, I've been under the impression that you could, after a year has gone by, then
You can reconsider it.
it's reconsideration. It's based on 1 year rather than term of council. So that has been our understanding. 1 year, not term of council, but you probably know maybe more about that than us, but that's what we've been doing.
I have an idea for a change to the procedural bylaw.
James has got it here. Okay.
No, you got the procedural bylaw. You are correct. The timeline here is a year.
Yeah. So that's why I'd like to see what the date on that is.
Which one's
I
still
believe it was
valid, I guess?
October 3rd, I believe. It was my first night sitting in this chair. I remember it well. October 3rd.
October? So it hasn't been a year. Wait until October, Harold.
Counselor Height.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Cridland is right. It was October the 3rd, and this council decided upon hearing from all of the people and from the fire chief, we would lose our shuttle service accreditation. There was the 8-kilometer range and for the people's and insurance, and hence we sent staff forward on this mission, and we included it to bring the EMS station in with it. Had we decided to combine the two stations, it probably should have happened on that day. Because right now, if we stop everything, that means staff has just wasted months and months and months worth of work. All for nothing. The motion, it hasn't been a year, and Councillor Sonnenberg can certainly bring that back as a motion of reconsideration before the year, or bring it as a notice of motion after the year. This just allows staff to move forward to look for potential properties. There's nothing in here that says we're on the hook for all of this money and yada, yada, yada. All right, so I don't, honestly, I don't know what the big deal is, but it hasn't been a year, this I know.
Well, we're still trying to find out where it is, and as far as reconsideration, that would have something that would probably have to be done at council, not at committee. Go ahead. Yeah?
I thought I heard Councillor Sonnenberg say he was withdrawing his amendment?
Yes?
So that's off the table?
That's
then,
off the
isn't it?
table now.
Okay, thank you.
So we can call the vote on what Councillor Black has said, or that staff report CSD 17-14 combined. I think I read it before, but I'll do it one more time. Fire EMS station in St. William be received as information, and that council instructs CDS staff to proceed with an expression of interest for site development options in St. Williams, and further, that council approve in principle the merger of capital project budgets for Fire Station 10 replacement and EMS Port Rowan base replacement in a combined co-located facility in St. Williams, recognizing that the final approval will be at council discretion. Comments, Councillor Black.
on reflection, it says in St. Williams. Like, are all the locations in St. Williams? I thought that there was, we were told that there was one that was just north of St. Williams, which wouldn't be right in St. Williams.
Well, I think the chief can probably answer that one, or...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We looked at the original proposal back in October was to establish the need of Station 10, which we did and council approved.
Okay.
Then we looked at locations possibly north of the existing station then, and that was discussed. When we dealt with combining fire and EMS, now with EMS response and service delivery, limits you now where we're going to be in the hamlet of St. Williams now.
Oh, okay, so it is in the hamlet of St. Williams. Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have what we had before, or?
Yes, so this is previous, in October. So staff report CSD 1629, impact on closing the St. Williams Fire Station was presented. Mayor Luke moved that staff report 1629, impact on closing St. Williams Fire Station be received as information, and that council approve the continued fire protective services offered by the St. Williams Fire Station. Carried.
Okay. Okay, any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed. Moving on. Staff report contained CSD 1711, self-contained breathing apparatus.
Through the chair, I'd like to introduce, not that he needs any introduction, Deputy Chief, or Assistant Deputy, what are you, Dennis? I'm all Assistant
catchy,
Chief
isn't it?
Dennis Friesen.
It's catchy,
With that,
isn't it?
I'll leave it to him. Obviously, I'm tongue-tied here.
I don't feel so bad.
Through the
anymore.
chair to council, what I've asked the report today in front of you is that we were allowed to buy one brand of breathing apparatus, which would be Scott. You've already invested well over $1 million in Scott products now for the department for all 11 stations, and I just want to continue buying that brand of SCBA. I'll take any questions.
Questions? Councillor Wells. Councillor Oliver.
For those who are listening, would you explain why you only want to stick to this one company?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells. Yes, sir. None of the other brands are interchangeable. Scott is Scott, Interspiral is Interspiral. So if we were to change brands now, we wouldn't be able to integrate them with all what we have. And so that's the reason that we've invested this money in Scott product.
And if I understand it correct, all our firefighters are trained on this one type of apparatus?
That is correct.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is going to show my ignorance a little bit on this, Assistant Chief, but the Scott Air Pack, I totally agree with the rationale, but is there only one supplier of Scott Air Pack products, and that's Scott themselves?
Scott is the brand name. There's 4 or 5 dealers that can
Okay.
give us bids, competitive bids on the
So
Scott
you're
product.
still going to be getting competitive bids on the product. It's just the tender will say one product, and that is the Scott product.
Through the chair to Councillor Oliver, yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, and that's good. So do you need to be exempt from our purchasing policy still? Yes,
Through-
I'm seeing a nod over there.
Yes, through the chair, but the new purchasing policy, because we've asked for a specific brand, we have to have council's approval.
Okay.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question has to go to the treasurer here. We're going to be funding these by debentures. That's sad. But forget the sadness. How many years is it going to take us to pay these off? Is this a 5, a 10, or a 20-year debenture?
Through the chair, it would depend on the rates at the time. For an item like this, it would probably be over 5 years because of the dollar amount. However, we would have to see what the rates are like at the time that we would issue the debenture.
Okay, so can you explain to me why we're debenturing $138,000 of consumables, I'm assuming?
Through the chair, I would have to check my notes to see why we would debenture this particular capital item. I imagine perhaps there's no reserve available for this item and we didn't want to affect the tax levy.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wells.
That line of questioning, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the question myself. when we do the budgets, was this item included in the budget?
Go ahead. I can't tell you that, but
Through the chair, yes, this item was approved in the 2017 capital budget.
did someone move that motion? Councillor Columbus, did you have something?
Just a question, what is the life of an air pack?
3 years. Through the chair to Councillor Columbus, 15 to 20 years. We're getting up to 17 years on our old ones now.
Mr. Chairman, you need a mover, I will move the recommendation.
Okay, awesome. Councillor Columbus has moved that staff report CSD 17-11, self-contained breathing apparatus, be received as information, and that council exempt staff from the quotation and tendering procedure for goods and services outlined in Norfolk County Policy EBS-02, Section 4, to permit a single source standardization of Scott's Air Pack self-contained breathing apparatus during the the procurement process. All those in favor? That is carried. I want to go to page 370 because there are a couple more that have to be done today. So it's staff report FS 17-22, 2017 final tax rates. Mr. James?
Thank you,
You're
Mr. Chair. Through the chair to mayor and council, this is an annual report required by the municipal act. In order for council must pass a bylaw to set the final tax rates for the purpose of raising funds approved in the annual levy supported budget. By adopting the 2017 final tax rates and approved of the tax policy bylaws, the approved 2017 tax levy may be billed and collected. The act requires tax bills be sent a minimum of 21 days before the due date. It is anticipated that final tax bills will be issued in late July or early August, providing taxpayers with more than the required notice. The final tax installment due dates are scheduled for August 31st, and the second installment is October 31st, 2017. Please note, for transparency reasons, Finance has improved the attachment with the tax rates. We also include now the current value assessment for the taxes in each tax category, so you can take a look and see what the farm rates have for CVA and taxes with the Norfolk portion and the education portion separated in columns. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? I have Councillor Black.
Questions, we need to get some money in our coffers, so let's pass this, and I move the
Yeah.
recommendation in the report.
Okay. Councillor Black has moved that staff report FS 17-22, 2017 final tax rates be received, and that council approve the final tax rate as set out in report FS 17-22, and further that a bylaw setting out the 2017 final tax rates be presented to council for approval. All those in favor? That is carried. We're moving on to staff report FS 17-23, tax capping and clawback parameters. James, it's
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to mayor and council, this is a routine annual report as well. Provincial legislation and regulations provide that council must annually approve the tax policies outlined in this report. As the capping program is self-funded from within the property class, each shortfall may be funded from within the 2017 approved budget. Once all tax policy bylaws have been approved by council, the final tax billing will be issued based on the levy requirements in the approved 2017 levy-supported operating budget. In order to expedite Norfolk County's exit from the mandatory capping clawback program, staff recommends taking full advantage of available options for 2017. The recommendations included in this report utilize all capping tools available to the county to move as many properties to CVA taxation as possible while limiting tax increases to any property within the commercial, industrial, or multi-residential classes. Again, if there's any questions related to tax capping or clawbacks, I'd be excited to answer them.
Councillor Black.
Only a treasurer would say that. Just wondering, there's only 8 properties that you've indicated here, and how drastic is the capping, or how far over and how far under? Is it a huge amount, or is it pretty close that it's not going to be too onerous upon these people if they're having to pay the full amount rather than the clawed back portion?
Through the chair, I'd have to look at those specific properties. There are some that would have a large amount clawed back, where if we were to stop this right now, they would get a significant impact. However, every year, it gets closer and closer with the 5%, 10%. And once you sell a property, it goes to CVA as well. So we're getting close.
All right, good. So, I don't know, I'd move the recommendation in the report.
Okay, further from anyone? If not, Councillor Black has moved that staff report FS 17-23, 2017, tax capping and clawback parameters be received, and that the 2017 capping program limit for multi-residential, commercial, and industrial classes be as follows: that the annualized tax limit increase be set at 10%, that CVA tax limit percentage increases is set at 10%, and the dollar threshold for capping and or clawback is set at $500, and further that a property be exempt from capping calculations in 2007 if in 2016 it was a CVA or crossed over to CVA tax in 2016, and further that Norfolk County opts to phase out capping for all properties within the commercial property class, and that further that the cost of capping and clawback be funded from within the same property class where sufficient funding is available, and further that is, if sufficient funding is not available within a property class, any shortfall shall be expensed in 2017 levy-supported operating budget for tax write-offs, and further that a bylaw be passed to give effect to the above. Any questions or comments? Councillor Black.
Chairman, through you to James, the one further just makes reference to commercial properties, and I know, is this not dealing with commercial and industrial as well as multi-res? So is this just, did you mean to just include commercial? So if you look at your resolution there, just about the is it the third, the second and further that. It just makes reference to commercial. Should it not also make reference to industrial? Or maybe there isn't any industrial.
Through the chair, that is a new legislation that we can use for 2017, and I believe it is just for commercial at this time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All those in favor? That is carried. We are going to move in camera. We have a couple of things that we have to deal with as well, so I need someone to, where'd it go? There it is. My pen, I can't do it with a pencil. I need someone to move that we go now in camera, that committee convene in closed session at 8:22 p.m. to discuss one matter pursuant to Section 239B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personnel matters respecting an identifiable individual, including employees of the local municipality or board. I need a mover. Councillor Wells. All those in favor? That is carried. We're in camera. Okay.
You betcha.
Session is 8:40. I need someone to move out of camera. Councillor Oliver. The committee adjourns this closed session at 8:40 p.m. and reconvene in open session. Oops, I got to sign it. All those in favor? That is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Height and seconded by Councillor Columbus that report EBS 17-33 be received as information, and that Council approves the increase of 1 FTE as outlined in report EBS 1733 in order for permanently accommodate and to fulfill the requirement of the Ontario Human Rights Code and assist with meeting the compliance obligations to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. All those in favor? That is carried. There we go. We have a few more that we can deal with, I guess. We've got a good 15 minutes. We'll start at 3:53, staff report CBS 17-11. Oh, we did that one, sorry. I got to get the wrong one again. Page 356 and 57, staff report PW 734, Clinton Street, parking restrictions. Lee.
Through the chairman to council, the next three reports that are coming before you this evening are all about the same thing. We're reviewing some things, and from an operational point of view, we're asking for parking to be prohibited. They'd actually come up at different times. If not, they would have all been combined in one report. So we apologize for having three of them, but it was just the way it worked out, and it will be corrected in the future, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on the Clinton Street report.
All three of them? Or one at a time?
I'm happy to answer any questions on all three of them.
Okay. Councillor Wells, Councillor Brunton, Councillor Columbus. Okay, Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I wish to deal with the report dealing with Clinton Street. That's the one that I am most interested in. This has been after the construction phase. The owner of Erie Beach and the mini golf has on several occasions objected to the fact that we have taken away parking. In the past, and I have lived there for some 30 years, in the past people were able to pull off on the shoulders, and after we finished our construction, then obviously that is not a possibility now. He's gone out of his way to suggest that he would be willing to donate property to Norfolk County for us to extend the parking. Mr. Chair, in my community, the number one problem, I have many problems, but the number one problem I think I have is lack of parking, especially during the summertime. And to use the rationale that the maintenance or the driving or the workers find it difficult to do their job, to the best of my knowledge, I have never heard, seen, or been told of any accidents that have ever happened in that corner or on that stretch of road. So why is it today such an issue? All we had to do was extend it a little bit, widen it, and we would have had parking. So that's my question to staff. Why now?
Lee?
Through the chairman to council, with respect to that, there's a lot of parts of operations, and I'm sure that with parking on both sides and the fire truck not being able to get down the middle, it does cause some concern to the fire department. That's an operational thing. It's also an operational consider from EMS. Historically, vehicles have parked on the boulevards. They have not parked on a shoulder. They parked on the boulevards. They made a mess out of the boulevards. And when the road was reconstructed, a proper road design was put in with respect to stormwater management, which is something that, as we know, 25 years ago wasn't anywhere near the same level it is today. Curbs, part of the curb system is to contain the water so that the stormwater management is actually addressed properly. The alternative to that is ditches. To address the stormwater management in the area. So the end result through this is that there is insufficient right-of-way on Clinton Street as it existed to be able to fulfill the requirements of what we had to do and ensure that the operational needs of the organization are also met.
Further? If not, are you prepared to move the motion, Councillor Wells? Since no? Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Public Works, has this been passed through the Board of Trade or any of the other merchants and stuff? I almost feel bad that I brought up the whole redesign Port Dover and asked you how many parking spots were removed 2 weeks ago, because now we're formally going to remove a whole pile more than the 4 you suggested that we only removed that day.
Through the chairman to council, these were not formal parking spots. These were people pulling off onto boulevards and not parking appropriately. They were not parking properly by parking on the boulevards. That's not a designated parking area under our bylaws.
They were formal to me before they were curbed. And I guess,
They
do
were
we
not
have a
formal parking spots,
parking
though.
plan? Like, there's some issues down there with the way the street's designed. That's how I feel anyway, because I don't know the names of them to tell you here, but some of them could have had angle parking over by the lighthouse on both sides and been turned into a one-way. Like, I find it didn't get any better with the new road for parking in Port Dover. I found it got worse. Is there any parking?
I apologize. I can't speak to the history of how those roads, those projects were well underway long before I came to the county, so I don't know what instructions were given to staff at the time. So I can't speak to the history of how they got to be designed the way that they are. I just know that right now we are having considerable operational difficulties with Clinton Street, as well as with Harvest Lane and with Charles Street.
Okay.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee, I know you've been getting calls about Harvest Lane parking problems, and I've been getting them too. But have we, with all these reports here, have we gone to the residents to inform them that this is happening today or finalized next week?
Through the chairman to council, no, we have not gone to the residents because these are not as a response to residents' concerns. These are a response to our operational needs. This isn't, the response to these is not because we have people complaining about them. It's because our own staff are experiencing difficulties with undertaking our legally required obligations. That's why we've brought these ones forward.
Right. So
should it come from should it be driven by a residential need, we would have been in contact with the residents in the area to discuss it.
So we're doing this with no public feedback, basically, but we are as a councillor, I'm getting calls from residents that are fighting with their neighbors because someone's parking in front of their house every day and blocking the street, that type of thing.
Through the chairman, we frequently also receive phone calls about people who don't want people parking in front of their homes, etc. Those ones we explain that the road, that parking is permitted in that area, and there is no operational reason to prohibit parking in that area. These ones are, again, these are not as a result of complaints from the area. These are a result of our operations experiencing difficulties with trying to operate the business that we operate.
So the one I know best is Harvest Lane. And do you feel that like where the sidewalk is really bisects the driveways, and then there's a 10-foot section between the sidewalk and the curb where the dandelions really grow well, nobody cuts them? Like, do you find a problem with the way that whole subdivision was designed? Because now we've got to face this parking issue.
Through the chairman to council, the biggest concern I would say that we have in that area is not so much the design of the subdivision, so much as the number of vehicles owned per home.
Right, there is an issue with that. So, okay, thanks very much for now.
Councillor Black and then Councillor Oliver.
Well, I'm ready to move the recommendation in 1743 Charles Street. And it isn't just operational there. I've had a number of calls from residents in that area. Cars parking on either side, and it turns it into practically a room for one vehicle only. So, and there's There's a school below, there's a crossing guard there, there's a post office, new postal box there. It's a bit of a nightmare. And all of the parking on Bellevue, we've turned that into just parking on alternate sides. All those cars that now can't park there have pushed into the subdivision and down Charles Street. So it is a problem there, and it needs to be alternate side parking. So I move the recommendation in the report for that one.
Okay. Any further questions from anyone? Let's deal with that one anyway. I'm trying to find it right now. I still have something to do with Councillor Oliver. Did you get your chance on the Clinton Street parking?
No, I didn't, Mr. Chair. If
Go
you want to
ahead.
deal with Councillor Black's motion first, that's
We'll
okay
deal.
with
Hang
me.
on a second, I got to find it. Yes. Simcoe, I have to find what I'm looking for here. 360, I know. I'm trying to find it. 360 somewhere has disappeared. 368. You got one there? Okay, we're there. Okay, Councillor Black has moved that staff report PW 17-43 Charles Street parking restrictions be received as information, and that a bylaw be executed to amend the current parking bylaw number 2011-98 to establish alternate side parking restrictions on both sides of Charles Street from Bellevue Ave to Beckett Boulevard. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any other one that you want to deal with yet? We haven't got anybody to move the Clinton Street, so I guess it's going to Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure Councillor Wells has been out with the Board of Trade. I got a call the other day from the Board of Trade asking me if I would come down for a little visit to look at a few things down there, one of which was parking. And I'm going to recommend a deferral of this staff report for 2 weeks at least, to give me as one, and if anyone is interested in going, more than welcome, I'm sure. But I'd like to see what the scenario is personally. I appreciate what our GM of Public Works has said, but now that I've been invited and one of the topics was parking, I'd request we defer this for 2 weeks.
Which one are you talking about, Clinton?
Clinton Street in Port Dover.
So deferral, you're moving that?
I am.
All those in favor? That is carried. I guess we have 5 minutes left. What about Harvest Lane parking restrictions? Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the Harvest Lane alternative side parking restrictions, but I do have another question for
Go
Ms.
ahead.
Robinson. And because there are so many vehicles on this street, there's some families that have 3-4 cars. Where are they going to park, Ms. Robinson? Where are they going to park? They can't park 2 vehicles, one behind the other, because they'd be over across the sidewalk, and then they get a bylaw infraction. Where are they going to park?
There is sufficient parking. We did several checks in the area to see the maximum number of vehicles. There is sufficient parking all the way along Harvest Lane on each side. Part of the struggle right now is people tend to want to park immediately in front of their property, and so you end up with like pinch points, for lack of a better phrase, through where you have 2 vehicles parked across from each other. So by them all parking on one side or all on the other side, that allows us to conduct our operations without any kind of interference.
In the space between the curb and the sidewalk, which is maybe 10 feet, do you not think that some vehicles will be parking in there on the grass?
I would leave that one up to enforcement to review that. We have seen vehicles parked sort of between the sidewalk and the curb, not on the grassed area, but on the driveway apron as well. But the majority of them, my understanding from our review is that the majority of them do not use their garages either.
Right, they use them for storage rather than
Correct.
vehicles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Columbus has moved that staff report W 17-35 Harvest Lane parking restrictions be received as information, and that a bylaw be executed to amend the current parking bylaw number 2011-98 to establish alternate side parking restrictions on both sides of Harvest Lane from Crozier Street to the dead end. Any questions? All those in favor? That is carried. This meeting is adjourned. I know that there are some that are coming forward for next week, but they can wait till then. Thank you. Sorry?
We do have 2 reports to discuss.
Okay, well, I thought we could,
We can say on the record.
would they adjourn till next week? Yes, until the council meeting? Yeah, okay.